Hi, and welcome to Shadows and Secrets Deep Dive Series. I'm Kerry Savage.
And I am Samantha Skal. Together, we are Shadows and Secrets, the writing retreat for mystery and thriller authors.
You can find out more on shadowsandsecretsretreats.com.
Awesome. We are both book coaches and authors, and we love talking about storycraft. This is our deep dive series about today's book is going to be The Last Mrs. Parrish, one of our favorites. And there will be spoilers. So if you've not read it, please do so immediately and then come back. And we do these deep dives into scary books we love, where we talk about twist, structure, masterful misdirection, villains, and anything else that strikes our fancy about mystery, thriller, and suspense, MTS for short. And first, I'd like to introduce my co-founder of Shadows and Secrets, Kerry. Kerry, why don't you tell the people about yourself?
Thanks, Sam. I am a writer and a book coach, and I love working with writers to make their fictional ideas come to life. I am super into immersive settings and details that really pull you into the book's world. And now it's your turn to tell the people who you are, Sam.
Oh, thank you so much. I love working with thriller, mystery, and suspense authors to plan and write twisty novels, and I especially dig brainstorming thrillers, thriller twists, and villains.
Awesome. So remember, another spoiler alert here, we are going to be giving everything away, including some key plot points here. So if you haven't read today's book, hit pause, go read it, and then come back.
Seriously, there's going to be no secrets unturned, so consider this your final spoiler alert warning. The structure of these talks is going to be the same every time. We're going to read the book jacket copy and then what the author has done to manipulate us before we even start.
And then we'll read the first page and what the author has done to manipulate us there.
And then we are going to break down each of the major twists in terms of how the author did it, what percentage of the way through it happened, and what on-screen clues existed to make sure the twist actually worked.
And we'll also talk through how the author accomplished the overall misdirection and manipulation of the reader, and the way the author used language or setting or other elements to set the reader up for maximum fear.
Which is why we read scary shit. We like to be scared by fiction.
Fuck yeah. All right, are we ready?
We are ready. Kerry has the physical copy this time, so she's going to hold it up. Today's book is by Liv Constantine, the wonderful sister duo Lynn and Val Constantine, and it's called The Last Mrs. Parrish. And it is an absolutely incredible book. I adore it. I honestly think it started my obsession with psychological suspense. I'd read a bunch of it before that, but this one just blew my mind when I read it for the first time a few years ago, and I just adore talking about it.
All
So do
right.
you want to
Awesome.
read the book jacket copy for us, and then I'll do the first page?
Sounds good. All right. So here is the book jacket copy from my copy. Amber Patterson is fed up. She's tired of being a nobody, a plain, invisible woman who blends into the background. She deserves more. A life of money and power like the one blonde-haired, blue-eyed goddess Daphne Parrish takes for granted. To everyone in the exclusive town of Bishop's Harbor, Connecticut, Daphne, a socialite and philanthropist, and her real estate mogul husband Jackson are a couple straight out of a fairy tale, blessed with two lovely young daughters. Amber's envy could eat her alive if she didn't have a plan. Amber uses Daphne's compassion to insinuate herself into the family's life, the first step in a meticulous scheme to undermine her. Before long, Amber is Daphne's closest confidant, traveling to Europe with the Parrish family and growing closer to Jackson. But a skeleton from Amber's past may ruin everything that she's worked toward, and if it is discovered, her well-laid plan may fall to pieces.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so before we get into it, I'm just going to read the first few words of the actual book because we continue with this theme. So I'm reading this on my phone Kindle app, so it's not going to be probably the first full page, but we'll get the idea. Amber Patterson was tired of being invisible. She'd been coming to this gym every day for 3 months, 3 long months of watching these women of leisure working at the only thing they cared about. They were so self-absorbed. She would have bet her last dollar that not one of them would recognize her on the street, even though she was 5 feet away from them every single day. She was a fixture to them, unimportant, not worthy of being noticed, but she didn't care, not about any of them. There was one reason and one reason alone that she dragged herself here every day to this machine at the precise stroke of 8. I'll stop there because it's kind of all we need. So what are they doing to us, do you think, with this opening? And it's just, I think that I just want to say that Lynn and Val, and I'll refer to them as Liv, just so I don't keep repeating myself there. They just absolutely nailed the misdirection with the book jacket copy in this first page. And there's so much to talk about there. But when you first read this, what did you actually think was going to be happening with this book? What did you assume?
That is a great question. So I think the one thing I noticed right in my first thing in my notes is the first section is labeled Amber. So I
Yes.
think that clues us right away into the fact that, like, yeah, we're in Amber. Not only are we in Amber's POV, but at some point or another, we're going to get another POV in there, because otherwise, why would you bother to tell us that it's Amber's POV? So it's like, right there, you set up for like, am I with Amber? Is Amber being truthful with me? Like, it automatically sets up a bunch of questions in your mind as the reader right before you've even read the first word. So right there, and I think the great thing too about that first page, or like the little bit that you read, and then it continues in that same vein, is we're being predisposed to sympathize with Amber a little bit here, because like she's talking about the designer sneakers and all the jewelry, and the thing that I wrote is like, well, a spoiled rich white lady is going to get her comeuppance, and Lord knows that they're due. So you set us up to kind of be in that mindset with Amber, at the same time knowing that like Amber is laying this terrible plan, and she's not a great person. And so should we be sympathizing with her? But we are. So it is this wonderful sort of, all of these questions and this mix of delicious ingredients that, like, where are they going to take us with this? Because it's already sort of twisting things a little bit.
Oh, so well
But
said.
all that from the first page. So there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, so well said. I completely agree. I mean, I think the book jacket copy does a masterful job of leading us to believe certain things, and then when we enter the story, we're still in Amber's POV, so we're like, oh, this book is going to be about Amber, and it is, but it's also not. And so here come the spoilers. So at exactly 53% of the way through, if you're reading the Kindle, I assume with the actual physical copy, it's more like exactly 50%. We switched to Daphne's POV. And up until that point, we're solidly on Amber's side, even though she's doing awful things. She's completely manipulating people. We know what her goals are from this first page. She's at this gym for a reason. She goes every single day. She needs to be there for a reason that we're going to discover. And then by the end of the first chapter, she actually does achieve her goal, which is getting Daphne, Parrish, to invite her over. And that sort of just starts the story off with a bang, because although we don't understand exactly what her goals are, we're on her side, even as we understand that she's being kind of a villain, right? So we think she's our protagonist, but then she switches after 50% to being the antagonist, obviously. And Daphne starts off as kind of the antagonist. She has the opposite goal from what we assume Amber has. Again, another like full-blown, amazing, masterfully executed twist. But from Amber's perspective, Daphne is the enemy. Daphne has what she wants. She has the husband, she has the house, she has the money, she has all this stuff. And from Amber's view, Daphne's not like enjoying any of it. She's not respecting it. She's not, giving it the attention it deserves. Particularly, she starts to like kind of lose herself and not dress as nicely as she used to. And she, being very thin is something that's very revered in this community. And Daphne starts to put on weight, and Amber is like, why would you do this? And, it's a book, it's about a certain group of people, and I do not condone losing or gaining weight for reasons like this. Just be healthy and be who you are. But anyway, it's so masterfully done, because we see Amber's view of all of this, and then we see the exact same scenes, which usually doesn't work actually from Daphne's perspective, but it does work with this, because they have opposite goals, and everything just completely flips halfway through. So just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say too, it works because it's having those scenes. It's not like we suddenly break in and we see the moment that Daphne meets Amber, and it's not repeating every single thing all the way through. It's choosing specific moments where, having Daphne's perspective on that same thing, you start to realize the manipulation that Daphne is applying to the situation. When all the time you thought, okay, it's just Amber sort of like manipulating things to get what she wants and directing situations so that she achieves her goal. It's like, oh no, there's a whole nother ball game happening here. And so it's cluing us in. So each time we see that and we see Daphne's perspective on it, it's like another little mini reveal or another peeled back of the onion, So it's not, it's just really, again, it's providing those extra dimensions of all of this stuff. It's really, really skillfully done.
Yeah, it's just incredible. I think this is such a good lesson in how POV can affect what the reader thinks. right? And so when we enter this story, again, the book jacket copy leads us to believe that this is going to be a book about Amber. And even as she's doing terrible things, we're on her side because we're in her POV, right? And we kind of like to be in a villain's POV sometimes. We kind of like to see someone doing some morally ambiguous stuff. And Amber has some secrets. We know that from the book jacket copy alone, but we don't assume it's going to be something truly awful. Or maybe we do, but we're on her side. And the way she views everything very much leads the reader to a certain conclusion, which is what makes the twist at 50% when we flip to Daphne's POV and understand that all of this was actually Daphne manipulating a situation and a way out of this marriage, which is what she wants, to her, exact specifications. Like she sets up plants, she makes sure that Amber and Jackson get together. She deliberately eats a bunch of candy and doesn't work out all the time or whatever was the requirement from him. And by the way, he is a total psychopath who dictates everything in everyone's lives. So let's just make that clear.
Which is another great thing, right? Because in the first half, where we're in Amber's POV, what we're seeing is her assumption that all the controlling stuff that Daphne does, and every the house being super clean, and her being very meticulous about what she eats, and all of this stuff is we are led via Amber's POV to believe that she is just sort of an exacting person that way, and she's a little like overly, like we think about like who would want to be around someone like that. She's no fun, and
Right.
it's all like in support of this crazy lifestyle. And then we find out that no, it's not her at all. It's actually her crazy abusive asshole of a husband who's doing all of this. So
Yes.
good luck, Amber, have fun.
And so at the same time that Daphne was manipulated into this marriage and then he flipped the switch, Daphne is setting Amber up to replace her, which actually is pretty malicious and evil in and of itself, right? You're setting another woman up to be in a situation, another person up to be in a situation. Yeah, in an abusive relationship. But I think the reason it works is because Amber's skeletons in her closet are that she full on wrongfully accused someone of rape, and then this person went to jail and then became paralyzed in a fight, and there's a baby out there, and it's just like she's just morally, objectively not a good person, right? And also Jackson goes to jail in the end. And so Amber is not actually left to be in this situation. The implication is that they will be separated. And so I think that I'm actually really curious if it was written that way from the beginning, or if it was like, oh, we'll just let these two evil people be together. And I would just love to know how this book got written and if that ending was in sight when they first started.
Yes, because even as much as we come to really dislike Amber for many good reasons, it's still a little hard to put your character in a situation like that where you're setting her up. Like we definitely want Daphne to escape. I mean, like I was praying for her the whole, like when all of that unfolded, I was just like, oh, that's really good. It's just a good twist, but also, as a human being, you don't want someone to be in that situation. But it is a little bit when you realize the depth of what Daphne has done and the situation that she's put Amber in, you almost flip back a little bit and go, does anybody deserve that?
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
And to your point, yes. Everybody gets so
even just that totally. Yeah. But even just that question of the fact we're talking about it, the fact that I think about this, I first read this book, it came out in 2017. I think I looked back at my Amazon. I bought it in 2020, so I feel lame that I didn't know about it for 3 years. But the fact that it's still just sort of, that's a question that we can all ask ourselves as authors. It's like, how far do you want to go? Because you're so right that Daphne doing this makes her fairly evil, right? She's saving herself, but she's sacrificing another human to a situation that probably will end in death. That's sort of the implication. That's part of what makes this, so suspenseful and thrillery, and it is psychological suspense, but it just, if Daphne doesn't get out, she will die. That is very clear once we read her section of the book. And she's setting Amber up to be in this exact same situation. And, Amber has done some stuff. She's potentially like a little more equipped to handle with it. She's also a master manipulator, but she's not as psychopathic as Jackson is. And so,
thank God, it'd be really hard to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the twists themselves, of which there are many. So for new viewers, there are 3 standard twists that happen in, I would say, every single modern thriller. The expectation is that there will be 3. There's the midpoint turn, which is called a turn, or, the midpoint twist. There's the climactic twist. Midpoint happens at usually exactly 50%. It's pretty wild when you start looking at like movies or reading through a book and you get to this moment where you're like, oh, well, we can't go back, everything has changed. Look at that page number and you're probably going to be somewhere in that like 48 to 52% mark. The climactic twist, this one has several. But I would say that, with the way that they wrote this at exactly 85%, we come back to story present in Amber and Daphne's POV now switching. And that's one thing to note, actually, is that Amber's POV is in story present up until we switch to Daphne's. Daphne's is entirely in flashback, which like should not work, right? As book coaches, I think you and I both would be like, oh, no, like that's not a standard thing that should work, but it completely does with this, because we're viewing, as exactly like we were talking about, everything that's happened, these major moments where Amber noted, the wine glasses are an inch apart, and the wine that spills on the couch, Daphne completely freaks out over, and there's these little creepy turtles everywhere, and whatever it is, like there's all kinds of scenes that we're looking at, but just through flashback, through Daphne's perspective. Which means that Daphne's chapters would not work without Amber's being first.
Exactly. And I think it's a great example to your point of like, what we, I think, generally say, which is you have to know what the rules are in order to be able to break them. And then not only do you need to just know it, you can't break it just because you feel like it. You have to have a really good reason for breaking those rules. And obviously, like the way that it's, Daphne's section is holding a mirror up to like key parts of Amber's section. And that is the purpose. So like there absolutely is, like that is the driving force of all of that right there. So yeah, I mean, that's, if you asked them, I would imagine that was, this is exactly why we did it. And you can break rules and you can get away with it when you have this very, very good reason for doing so. So it's a great example.
Yeah. One very, very, very well said. I completely agree. And so we have this climactic flip, right? Like what happens right up to that point is that when we left when we left Amber's POV, she's pregnant and she set an ultimatum for Jackson. And she's like, if you don't leave your wife, I'm going to, I can't actually remember what her threat is.
She threatens to terminate the pregnancy.
Yes, that's what it was.
She threatens to disappear. So because I think it's not a huge amount of time, but there might be a point where it's like almost like too late to terminate the pregnancy. And then she's like, well, I'm just going to take off and you'll never see us again, kind of thing.
Right. So huge threat. Yeah. And then that's the point when we flip to Daphne's perspective. Daphne's looking back. And then when we return back to story present, which is when Amber is pregnant and there's this ultimatum on the table, that's when we really see things start to happen, which is the climactic scene. And so, if you think about what Amber wants, she wants money, power, Jackson. She's driven by jealousy, and, she feels entitled to this life in a way that, she's an underdog her whole life. She changes herself to fit into exactly what he wants. And right up until that point, when we enter the climactic scene, Amber is unaware of what a psycho he is. And of course, now we know that he's a complete psycho because of Daphne's chapters. And so the tension just like skyrockets, right? Up until the 50% mark, we were like, yeah, Amber, okay, like, great ultimatum. You're going to get what you want. It kind of seems like it. He seems super into you. He's engaged in an affair with you. This seems like it's going to go. And those are great stakes. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, Amber, you don't know what you're walking into, which is part of what makes this work so well. And so Daphne wants out. She wants to be safe. She wants her daughters to be safe. She wants her charity to succeed. She has very clear goals as well. And so when we actually get to this climactic scene, the story question is answered. Amber got the guy, right? Like that's done. And so what keeps the tension up is all this other stuff about Daphne getting her comeuppance. And so there's tax fraud. There's the reveal of Amber's secrets. And then this like final twist, which you know, is also another very important thing in thrillers, is that there's going to be some other little thing that then drives the rest of the story from there on out. And in this case, it's the power gets taken back by Daphne. And so up until this point, Daphne really, you know, she got out and she was able to get Jackson arrested. She gets her comeuppance, but then she confronts Amber. And we've been waiting for this the entire time. And it's not the story question, but because we've had both their POVs and they've been at opposite ends, we really want this confrontational scene. And that's when we learn that Douglas, the person who works for Daphne for the charity, is a plant. And we were not expecting this. It has never been revealed up until that point, and it works just chef's kiss well. Yeah. What did you think of like I mean, it just is like a rip roaring, page turning, you know, 85% through the end. Like you can't put it down.
No, I mean, I kept writing twist, twist, twist. Final twist, delicious. And then my notes were like, nope, there's one more.
Yeah.
So it just keeps coming and keeps unfolding. And in ways that, you know, I think what happens a lot in Daphne's section is the seeds that have been planted in Amber's section, like you said, they grow and they come to fruition, and you see like that new perspective, and oh, you're putting pieces together. And then but really, like, that's your expectations. By the time we get back to story present, your expectations of this book have really been met in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Everything else just kind of feels like the whipped cream and the cherry on top. And it's just like, oh, this is so good. Because to your point, like the goals that both Amber and Daphne have, like when we get back to story present, they've gotten what they wanted. Amber got the guy and Daphne got out of this horrible marriage, but now there's even more. And to your point, like that confrontation at the end, just like Daphne is just, I mean, it's just brilliant. It's just so good. You're like, we knew that she had put things in motion. So we knew also now, like the other thing that all of that past stuff has done has told us this is what Daphne is capable of. Like the Daphne we meet in Amber's POV would not be able to pull something like this off.
So well said. Yeah.
But the Daphne that we meet in her POV, we're like, oh, okay, she's really smart and she's very goal oriented in that way. So it stands to reason at the end that you're like, oh no, she wouldn't just be satisfied, or she doesn't have to just be satisfied with getting out of the marriage. Like she took everybody down.
Yeah. Well, her agency
Burned
is
all the
so
bridges.
yeah, totally. Her agency is so strong. I mean, both of their agencies, right?
Yeah.
Like Amber this takes no prisoners, just goes after what she wants, and we love her for it. It's part of the reason that she works so well as a character is she's interesting because she is forcefully moving forward with what she wants. She doesn't just like sit back and let things roll over her. She's actively trying, as is Daphne. And you know, like we keep saying, like they're working kind of toward the same thing, actually. They both want Amber to have Jackson. It's just that
That's true. Yeah.
Amber's
Yeah,
perspective
right.
is entirely not accurate about Daphne. Um, I'd love to talk about their emotional arcs and how that actually comes to fruition with this, because this is a big part of what makes a meaty story work, is if there is some kind of aha moment. And because, you know, I would argue that like Daphne is almost the protagonist because she's the one who's kind of manipulating everything from behind, but the way it's set up, we think Amber is. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on who the actual protagonist of this book is, because that's just kind of a difficult one.
That's interesting. Well, I go back to, I mean, I think about the framework that you and I have talked about, that you have put forward about how the villain really drives the story.
Yeah.
And so who's really driving the story in all this? I guess it's Daphne, right? I mean, really, she is the kind of person, like, it's not that
Yeah.
Amber doesn't have agency, but if the person who is pulling all the strings and making all this stuff happen is the villain or the antagonist, then I guess really that would be, from a big picture standpoint, I think it would be Daphne, which feels weird because
Yeah, but you're right.
I think she's ultimately the person that we root for, right? She's sort of, so
Yeah,
she wears both hats in a way, which is really interesting. Maybe
it
that's
is.
another of many reasons why this is so skillfully done, because at various points in the narrative, you could say either one of them is the antagonist or the protagonist, right? Depending on how you
Yeah,
define that role. And that should not work.
it
Like
should
it
not work, but it
should be
totally
really,
does.
really clear. And I guess ultimately, I would say that oh, now I can't say that she's the protagonist, even though I want to. I really want to,
No,
but
yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you. Uh, Daphne's like the mastermind villain, which is a just for new viewers, this is this term that I came up with to describe the person who's kind of the Machiavelli, like pulling strings behind the scenes. It's usually the person that has the 98% final twist confrontation with the protagonist. And because MTS, mystery, thriller, suspense, I like to think of it as it's the villain story, as Kerry said, but it's experienced by and translated by the protagonist. And by that definition, Amber is 100% our protagonist, right? Which also tracks with her being on the book jacket copy and everything. And even
yeah.
though she is villainous, I don't think that she is the villain in this. I think that by our definitions, and if we're applying this construct on top of it, Daphne is the mastermind villain, and Jackson is kind of the fake villain, right? He's evil, but
Yeah.
he's sort of just like this other, he's like the play, not the plaything, but like the distraction almost from these two women trying to get what they want. Like he's the pawn.
Yeah, he is the pawn, and which I think is extra delicious too, because if you ever said that to him, he
Oh
would
no,
be
yeah.
and tell you that you were, completely crazy, which is, yeah, again, another delicious thing about like take several seats, boy. Like there's more going on here that you have no idea about, and it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's being manipulated by both of them as he's trying to manipulate them. And of course he, ultimately has no power because they figure it out. Um, so in terms of the emotional arc, like Amber's, if we take the stance that she's the protagonist, her transformation is a negative one, right? Like she realizes she can't get away with this at the end when Daphne confronts her. And that emotional aha moment, like it kind of doesn't happen until much later than typically happens. Like typically I would argue that the aha moment happens for the protagonist like as they enter the climactic scene. And Amber is getting what she wants. She's even more sure of herself. She doesn't really have I guess her misbelief is that she's going to get away with this. And it starts to crack in the climactic scene because she starts to question, because she goes and she lives with Jackson. We have that chapter where she's with Jackson and he's a bit of a psycho, right? And she's like, oh wait, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then we flip back to Daphne's POV and we start to see all the things that she set up to really just like burn everything down as she leaves. Um, but it's not her first time. She's done this before. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different take?
I think so. I mean, I think, we often talk about like, the protagonist and I suppose the antagonist too, like, do what is their goal? When do they get what they want? And then
Yes.
what happens? And like she gets what she wants well, I mean, it's a little more than halfway through the book because we leave off when we think, she's sort of confronted Jackson with this, but we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know that he's going to leave Daphne yet for her. And in fact, he doesn't at that point, right? It's just like
yeah,
that's where we switch. Um, so ultimately, like she gets what she wants, and then it's that thing of like, well, you got what you want, but it's not actually. You're realizing now, like, oh shit, what
yeah,
I wanted is not what I thought I wanted, which is, I would say, like just an excellent place for an MTS protagonist to end up with because it provides you a twist, right? Sort of a built-in twist
yeah,
there because oh, I got what I wanted. If you get what you want and everything is fine and hunky dory, then it's off, like it's a happily ever after ending kind of thing. And, we don't do happily ever afters really, or at least
not an
not
MTS. It's
straightforwardly.
like chaos to order for now,
Exactly.
and probably the murderer is dead or the person doing bad things, but not always. And in this case, I think that they managed to meet that genre expectation with like, Daphne gets away and gets what she wants. She blows everything up on the way out and gets to go live a happy life. And by the way, there is a sequel coming out. It comes
Saw
out.
your news about that. I'm very excited to see where they go with this because much like what they did here, I'm like, how are they going to
I
pull
know
it out?
I've already pre-ordered it. I can't wait to read it. It comes out on June 18th, 2024. It's called The Next Mrs. Parrish for those of you that don't know.
All right.
Um,
Well, we'll have to do like we'll have to give it a little time before we do a
yeah.
deep dive on that because we need to give a chance for everybody to read it, but we definitely need to do a deep dive on
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for writing this, Liv Constantine. I can't wait.
the stuff.
Um, yeah, it just the genre expectations are met, but not in the way that we expected, right? Like because we thought Amber was our protagonist, she actually loses in the end. She's confronted, Jackson is gone. We're sort of open-ended with like what happens to the money, you know, like I think they're married at that point. Um,
Amber and
Amber
Jackson.
and Jackson. Can't
Yes.
remember.
Yes.
Yeah. And so Amber's in this house. Jackson is in jail for tax fraud. Amber's been exposed, but it turns out Jackson already knew about that, right? And everything comes out for Amber. And so we leave her in sort of a like really bad spot because she's now in this marriage. She can't get out. And he knows everything. And he's and it's like holding this over her, right? What she did to this other man and that she has this child.
And you think, well, maybe it'll be okay because Jackson's going to jail, but her whole reason for being and wanting to get into this was to have the power and the money. And the
Yeah.
implication is that because of the tax evasion, like the money's going to be gone too.
Oh,
So
yes,
she's got a
yes.
kid and she's in this bad marriage, which I mean, sure, could she divorce him? I guess maybe, even though
But
like
she'd be left with nothing, and also he knows her secret. So
exactly.
like, where does
And
that
he's
leave
threatened
them?
with that. So what happens? Like,
Yeah.
you know, she prepared to face the consequences of all of that. Maybe,
Mm.
maybe not. What's the worst? Which is your worst option? Because it really is, it's weighing shitty options at this
Yeah.
point. And then there's Daphne who's walking away, who's lit the match and, you know, like thrown it into the pile of gasoline. And it's just like, I'm out of here, living in my house on the beach, running my foundation. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just fantastic.
it really is. So
Yeah.
did I answer your question? I'm not sure
It
I did.
did. Yeah. No, I think we covered that.
Excellent.
And just one final thing on twists, like the reason that these all work so well again is because we are directed to believe so through the POV. Right? Like Amber is seeing what's going on from her own unique perspective and making all kinds of assumptions. And we go along with it because we don't have any other reason not to. And there are little clues, right? Like these weird turtles and like, you know, the Daphne's meticulousness with where things are in the house and keeping everything clean and whatever. Her kind of like low level fear and but we read it through Amber's perspective as just sort of like OCD almost, right? Like it's just like she's a very nervous person and it doesn't, we don't assume that it's anything to do with Jackson. And then we learn it's everything to do with Jackson. And we are the way this becomes twisty is because it's unexpected, right? Amber has led us to believe a bunch of stuff based on her assumptions. Daphne's led us to believe a bunch of stuff based on her assumptions. And Daphne's honestly a bit of an unreliable narrator because she doesn't tell us everything. She's not lying. No one's lying, but she doesn't tell us that Douglas is a plant. She doesn't tell us, you know, we know that she planted Amber in Jackson's office to make this happen and all of this. Then the boyfriend she put in place so that Amber would be driven toward, she knows that Jackson wants somebody who's owned by somebody else. And so all of that was by design. But this final twist where she does the tax fraud thing, like that's been in play for a really long time. And she was willing to blow up everything to get out, and including sacrificing Amber. But we do not know about this until the very, very end, even though the clues are sort of there along the way.
Which is
So
another, like, you know, I think another tribute to how well they've manipulated us with POV.
yes,
Because there's nothing in there that doesn't feel unearned. There's nothing
yes,
that feels like there was no point where I read one of these twists or reveals and I was like, I don't know, like that feels like a stretch, or I didn't get it. It's, of course you can interpret everything that the Amber, the way she interpreted it like it all made sense in her POV. And then when you
yeah,
get down, oh, of course, it really is literally like this is how she sees the world through these eyes and interpreting like this rich woman's lifestyle and everything that comes with it. And then in Daphne's perspective, like, oh, it's all because of these circumstances, and this is
yeah.
how, you know, how she's living her life. So it really, you're just seeing the world through their eyes, and that makes everything work. So
It's,
yeah,
yeah, just
another tip of the cap.
exactly. Yeah, just well done, Liv Constantine. We adore this book. Um, I think I think that's everything for this. We
Think
talked about it all.
yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, lots of delicious little twists. And I think I'll just say, as with House Across the Lake, as with most of these, I'm sure that we're going to be doing, like it's not, we talk about the big twists, but I think, you know, as I look back through my notes, I see like all the places too that I called out where the seeds were planted for all of these.
Yes.
So it's not just about these big moments. I mean, those are essential, they have to be there, but the way that it was seeded without being obvious or hitting you over the head, so that you get that delicious satisfaction as a reader of being able to go back once it's revealed and go, oh, like of course it was
Yeah.
right there, or like I'm putting this together in a new way. Like it's just, yeah, again, I think it's a level of skill involved that is something to aspire to.
And lots of revision. So just a gentle reminder
Yes.
to both Kerry and I, and to every other writer out there, do not compare your work in progress to books that are on the shelf. Like, I don't know how long it took them to write this book. It's an incredible book. It's a masterpiece in this genre and in general. But I assume it did not come out like this, right? There's going to be many passes, and these little seeds that Kerry's talking about, those can be planted later.
Mm,
You know, you may not know them at the beginning. It does help to plan out some of these big reveals and figure out what the villain is doing before you kind of start. But everyone has their own process, and the biggest thing is just to keep going.
absolutely.
Awesome. So as you can see, we love thrillers and nerding out about story structure. If this resonates with you, please join our newsletter to learn about our retreats, other free events like this one, and other things we're going to be putting out. Shadows and Secrets happens September 25th to 29th, 2024 in Salem, Massachusetts. And it is shadowsandsecretsretreats.com. That's where you can find us. Sign up for our email list, get on our waiting list to learn about when applications open, which is April 1st. And we
First,
could not be more excited to be talking and nerding out about all this stuff with you. And we hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
absolutely.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.